It's an honor and pleasure to be here with Rabba Dr. Carmella Abraham, who is a graduate of Yeshivat Maharat, this wonderful new phenomenon of Orthodox women rabbis in the community who are really changing the Jewish world and making history in Klal Yisrael. And you've been someone I've really admired from a distance, looking up to you as a teacher of Torah and someone who juggles so many intellectual and practical balls as both a medical doctor and as a rabbi and with a family and everything else you do.
Thank you.
So thanks for taking some time to talk.
So nice to be here.
So I know as an American Jew of Indian descent, I wonder if that was ever difficult in your upbringing in the Orthodox community. Did you ever experience any pushback or negativity?
Right. So overall, it was a very positive experience growing up, going to yeshiva day school. But there was always in the background subtle and sometimes, unfortunately, overt racism from within our community. And so it was something that I learned to deal with representing the Indian Jewish community, sort of the unofficial ambassador for our community. And actually things have gotten a lot better in our community from when I was growing up. However, though they've gotten better through my family and other Jews of color, I would say, or Sephardic Jews, Jews that are converted, there is still racism within our community, and it's something that just hasn't gone away.
I see it all the time. In the Orthodox community. Racist remarks that are overt or more subtle. And I remember just being in shul during the Obama presidency and two guys next to me talking about the Schwarze in the White House. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it that I was a part of a culture that thought like this. So I want to get to some advice you might give to folks. But before we get there, I'd love to just think in terms of Torah. Because, well, to people like you and I, it might feel obvious, like racism is anti-Torah. Some might want to connect the dots a little bit. So what are some of the Jewish values or some of the sources you might point to demonstrate that actually racism is not just a moral problem, but a Jewish problem?
Right. So, absolutely. So, very quickly, just ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Right? We should love our friend, brother, sister like ourselves. Kol Yisrael arevim zelazeh. Right? We're all responsible for each other, right? And then by extension to also non-Jews, right? But certainly our first family. Some of the Torah I taught at Jofa, we were talking about the Jofa conference. I did a session on racism, and I talked about Tzelem Elokim, which as we know, our Rabbi Yitzchak Greenberg talks about this all the time, and I referred to the Gemara in Sanhedrin, which says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu tava kol adam b'chotmo shel adam harishon ve'ein echad mehen domeh lechavero. Right, so God forged every man in the same mold of the original man, of Adam, of the first man, and no one is like his fellow. And I think Rabbi Yitzchak Greenberg, says very beautifully, as a result of this, any act that humiliates, denigrates, or hurts is seen as a form of desecration of the divine image and a reduction of God's presence. And so when we say those words, when those words come out of Jewish mouths, it makes us less. It makes us not the holy people that we are supposed to be. It takes away from us. And when we talk to our brethren and our sisters in that same manner, we reduce them in some way. They feel reduced. Yeah. And so it is very important for us to be very careful about the language we use and what we allow to be said.
Yeah. So one feels belittled, one feels like they don't belong, they feel inauthentic, like they're not the real deal, and potentially even feel unsafe.
Yes, well, I think a lot of it is confusion. Oftentimes, there are questions you get at a Shabbos table, and this has happened across, I'm just going to say non-Ashkenazi Jews, okay? They could be Sephardim of any branch. You'll be sitting at a table. It's the first time you've met this family or somebody at a table, and they'll look at you and say, "Where are you from?" And you'll say, "I'm from New York." And they'll say, No. where are you from?
Right.
And they're saying, I'm from New York. Like, I don't understand. No, where are you really from? And then that conversation starts to feel like a bit of an inquisition and an interrogation about the authenticity of your Judaism. Are you really Jewish? And really, those conversations have happened so often. Everybody has a go-to answer, or they just kind of like fade out, and they don't really feel part of the group. It's because you're confused. Are you actually genuinely curious about my background? But you don't really ask somebody that the first time you meet them. Or are you just trying to make, see if I belong, if I fit in or not? That's the confusion that most of us are left with. Yeah.
And oftentimes, that's very powerful what you're saying. And I think sometimes Tselem Elohim can be kind of perverted in a way that leads to some kind of hyper-essentialism that says that a Jew is fundamentally different from a Gentile. And even further, there's a certain type of Jew, and any Jew that kind of looks different than me isn't sort of essential. Like if you look at sources in the Kuzari around Jews being superior, or at the Tanya around different souls, and then how that racism towards Gentiles actually ends up having racism within the Jewish community as well. And that's the kind of the overflow, that the two are deeply interconnected, essentially. Yeah.
They are so interconnected. And I think that, again, when I talked about it at Jofa, I asked the group, like, where is this coming from? And somebody said, we're hurt people.
Yeah.
And I even said this to my husband the other day. I said, Jews have not stopped fighting for their freedom and their right to exist. If you're in Europe, you're fighting anti-Semitism, right? If you're in France, it's unsafe to walk the streets, even as a little kid. We have not stopped fighting. And it has taken a toll on us.
Internally and externally. I mean, the fact that, some psychologists say that trauma lasts for 7 generations. I mean, through our history, and this is just a European history of pogroms and crusades and Holocaust, and then looking at other, things that have happened in Africa or in Arab countries or in India. So that marginalization in societal level, but then in modernity, what happens, the divisiveness within the Jewish people also. So I think that we're a traumatized people. And I think that what happens in trauma is that we kind of hide away in fear in everyone who seems like us. And we push away anyone who doesn't seem like us. So I think part of this is a moral challenge we have to combat, but the other part of it is a healing process. That actually we're afraid of the other. And anyone who looks a little different from me, I need to kind of interrogate in a way that belittles, like you said. So I wonder, so some folks might say, I'm with you, I get it, but they might not know what to do. So I wonder if you have some like practical advice for folks who don't want to do the wrong thing, don't want to offend, and don't even realize they're doing this. What are some do's and don'ts you might recommend?
So we actually started with the first obvious, never say this word schwarzo. And I say this, of course we should never say the N word, which believe me has come back. And I say this, we put up with it, if Bubby and Zadie are saying it, we have to gently, and even if a friend is saying it, we don't take their heads off. But there has to be a constructive way to say, hey guys, we don't say that. That's not healthy. It's not good for us. Because unfortunately, when you use that word, it allows for other things to happen. And it opens up a door to other patterns of thinking that are not healthy for us as a Jewish people. Please never ask somebody which one of their parents is Jewish and which is converted. It's kind of cruel. It makes somebody feel like, oh, wait, how do you know is it because I'm not white? And also, we have to get away. The underlying presumption of that question is that all Jews are white. I actually push back against this concept of Jews of color. I think we're just Jews. And you see that more in Israel, where it's really a melting pot, and you do have more of it here. In New York, you do really have these huge communities of Jews from all over the world, but it hasn't gone away. It really hasn't. So I think those are very simple things. But then there's some obvious things. If you meet somebody who looks different from you the first time, just get to know them. See them as a person. There's no reason to ask about their background. They're very sensitive. They've probably been asked that 100 times before they've met you, and you're just 101. and they just go down in their heads this own pathway of they start to wonder about whether you're racist or not. It's not purposeful, it's just natural. And they genuinely want to talk to you about their backgrounds, but they want to do it in a safe place. And also, no one has to authenticate their Judaism to you. If I'm in your schools and I'm in your shuls, you've been vetted. And not that we should vet anybody, but really, like if you're within the Orthodox community, to me, it's like, it's sort of even sadder because we say all these things about how we have to be an Am Kadosh and we're halakhic Jews, and part of being halakhic Jews means that we have to also be caring in the softer skills, and in the Bein Adam L'Chaveiro. That has to also be a priority. That's very important. Don't refer to people's skin color. I cannot tell you how many times people will say, "Oh, one of your kids is darker than the other kid," or "You're brown," or "You're darker." It's kind of destructive over the long term. It makes that one kid who's darker in any family, or even the whiter kids are like, "Well, you don't really look like your brothers and sisters," or "How are you Sephardi?" or "How are you part of this tradition? You don't look like." I think that we have to just acknowledge that genetics are what they are, and that and that's it. And I think also just give people a break on Shabbos when they're at your table. Don't put them in the spotlight and make them racial representatives or ethnic representatives. If they say to you, "I'm from New York," leave it at that, and don't push it to anything more than that. What can you say? You can say something like, "Hey, I've never heard about Jews from, Persia, Syria, India, whatever, fill in the gap, Ethiopia. I'd love to learn more." That's just like a really nice way to approach it and not put the person on the defensive. I ask people to expand their friendships beyond just their little group. Look around. Look at the people in your life. Notice them. Bring them into your lives. There are all kinds of people that we see that are not just Jews, but non-Jews that are part of our lives. That's really important. And I think really, to me, this is going to make us as a Jewish people more holy when we can embrace our diversity within. That to me is, we each bring a unique voice, and we're much stronger, and our ideas and our Jewish law is made better and stronger for our kids. And we don't just walk the walk. We don't just talk the talk. We walk the walk. That's really important. That's the dissonance that our kids see, where you say something, but you say don't do this, but then you do it. It's really important for our kids to admire our behavior and to be inspired by us, and for us to live that credo. It's really important.
It's very powerful. That's a lot to absorb. Thank you. And I think it's powerful and wonderful. And I think that, I think back to Emmanuel Levinas and his sense that the face of another should, awaken a moral responsibility in us. And he's not talking about the skin color. He's talking about seeing humanity in people.
Right.
Seeing their eyes and seeing that we are created with this human dignity that transcends the superficial realm. In fact, the notion of tikkun olam coming from tikkun ha'olam, repairing the hiddenness, that actually there's this hidden sparks of holiness within us. Right. And that our job is to see people and see their sparks of holiness, as opposed to these this superficial way of identifying who's kind of in and out. So I think it's, and I think that we should challenge ourselves, our families and our schools, to make sure that we're modeling this best behavior, and that we're helping our kids come out of their bubbles, because I've met so many who've grown up in our system who know no one different, that looks different than themselves. In day school, even in college or in yeshiva, and then finally they go out and they're afraid of these people, and they put them down, and they think they can say things that are offensive, or they'll be defensive. Why? I can say Schwarzer, it just means black. My grandfather said Schwarzer, just means black. Don't tell me it means something else. Actually, it doesn't matter what you mean. It matters how it affects someone and how it belittles them. So So thank you.
Thank
It
you.
takes a lot of courage to speak on this issue, and you know you bring so much wisdom to this. I've admired you for your courage and wisdom
Thank
for
you.
a long time, and I wish you
you.
continued
Thank you so much, Roshma.
bracha and
Thank you so much
hatzlacha,
for having me.
and all of us should see our role to bring the Torah to the public square to combat racism in society and also within our communities right here. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.